before we went for the break, we were having that story on 10 years post-devolution, but with regards to health, when it comes to cooperatives, how has it been?
Wow, thanks for that question. For cooperatives, it's been an interesting journey. As you're aware, the cooperative movement in Kenya is large. And so it wouldn't move as fast as health or agri have gotten to move. The 2010 constitution, provided a new dynamic because cooperatives was amongst the devolved function. It has been a slow process, but very consultative, and I believe now we're in a better space moving forward for the cooperatives, given that they've learned lessons also from agri and from the health sector that they're building on, so that they don't go through the same learning curve.
Right. Well, let's just get a bit into the details now in terms of just assessment of the status of the Kenya cooperatives landscape, just away from, of course, the 10 years now. From where you sit, how can you assess it?
I think the cooperatives landscape right now is in a good space. I say that because if you look at our productive sectors of the economy, we have cooperatives across, right from insurance, financial, housing, the worker cooperatives, transport. So we have representation across the economic productive sectors. Statistics show that as of last year, there were about 27,000 cooperatives registered, 10 of which are active. As you know, with every startup, out of every 3 startups, out of every about 5 startups, I may be wrong, but about 3 don't make it to their 3rd year, right? So if you look at the ratio, it's not too bad of the active to registered cooperatives. From a policy perspective, the cooperative movement has also realized a number of strides. The National Cooperatives Policy was approved by Parliament. It was passed by Parliament as Sessional Paper number 4 of 2020. This sessional paper then got to delineate the functions that national government will carry out vis-a-vis the county government.
Right.
This provided, it was of course a very consultative process that has taken years. But they finally got to have an agreement on these functions, so that then there's some sense of order and harmony. And at the end of the day, looking at the cooperative societies themselves, they require a harmonized and enabling policy environment for them to thrive. So that was the resounding call through those conversations. So this national policy, or sessional paper number 4 of 2020, provided for 3 things. The cooperative legislation to be developed, cooperative institutions, and capacity building. So once that was set out, the national government also formed a task force to begin implementing now these 3 key areas. And this task force developed the draft bill, which they had to go through a rigorous consultative process because the movement is big, as I mentioned to you. The draft bill went through 6 regional stakeholder engagement forums or public participation forums, and a national validation workshop to just already start hearing out the voice of the cooperative movement. Will this be beneficial? What are the changes? What are your concerns? And as global communities, we were very fortunate to be part of that process and to provide technical assistance in that journey. The journey is not over yet, but the bill has made several strides. Looking also at the county level through collaborations with the Council of Governors, the USAID CLEAR program was able to develop a model county cooperatives bill, which we refer to as the frameworks, because there's a model policy bill and regulations that is aligned to now the national bill, the sessional paper, just to make it easier for the county governments to adapt those bills to their contexts to favor the cooperatives within their areas.
Right. You've talked about the strides. I want us to now talk about the gaps. What are the major policy gaps within the cooperative sector?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Allow me to take you through a journey of the policy gaps by also holding you through the process of some of the salient features of the national bill, of the draft bill, which attempt to address some of those. So one key gap was that the cooperative sector did not have a policy and legislative framework to guide operations post-devolution. So the bill seeks to now, the policy delineates those functions, and the bill goes further to give, the powers to carry out some of those functions. So it calls out offices like the Office of the Commissioner for Cooperative Development at national government and the Office of the Director for Cooperatives. The structure of the cooperative movement is also addressed in the bill to accommodate devolution, where the primary cooperatives and the unions would be governed or regulated at the county level, and then introduces federations, which would be regulated at national level, given that their scope would go beyond county borders, as it were. And then we have an apex, and the apex through the bill would be strengthened to carry out its functions and also move towards self-regulation. One key issue, and time again we keep hearing, in the news, and I will not delve into for purposes of this interview,
right,
is on cooperative governance, ethics. Those concerns keep coming up every now and then, and this bill has sought to tighten up, cooperative governance, having learned from, the issues that have been arising in the movement over the years. So I'd say these are some of the key things, and provides institutional frameworks to better support the cooperative movement. I think as an innovation to try and loop in more youth and women representation and leadership in the cooperative movement, new models in Kenya, like the worker-owned cooperative model and shared services cooperatives, have also been introduced within the types of cooperatives that are functioning in Kenya. I think that's really, really exciting, because as a program, we supported piloting and registration of about 10 worker-owned cooperatives. They cut across different sectors, and majority of them are the youth. And so far, in the years that we've worked with them, we've seen this really improving the lives of the youth and women involved, improving livelihoods, and providing a safe space for innovation and creativity and personal growth. And such a safe space, if it also contributes to economic growth, I think that's really positive.
Right. You've talked about livelihoods and improving livelihoods in that case. Let's just talk about now, there seems to be a bit of disconnect between policy formulation and implementation. So how do you ensure that the formulated policies are successfully implemented, especially when it comes to the county governments?
That's really, that's true. Because if you also look regionally, we, as Kenya, we've come up with so many very good forward-looking policies and legislation that our neighboring countries have borrowed and adapted for their context, meaning that the policy formulation process itself doesn't have much of a challenge.
Right.
The gap in implementation then arises with, one, funding to do a robust public participation, which would require resources and take time.
Right.
So for our observation as a program on the government side, while they're willing to engage, unless they're additional partners or there's a deliberate funding to go towards that, that's been one key gap. But moving away from resources and money issues, let's go back to technical aspects. The policy makers or the political class set the agenda, and they know what needs to be done. The technical teams are the ones who've been on the ground doing this work. They know how it should be done. They know where the problems are and where the shoe hurts, and have proposals as well on, how this can be improved. So in the spaces where we've worked as a program, we've always encouraged that, even in the initial brainstorming or drafting sessions, let's have those who know the what and those who know the how come together to the room and reason together. Because that then makes this draft legislation or draft policy something that will eventually be implementable. Because we've answered the what and how.
Right.
The third and critical aspect is room for dialogue with stakeholders in the process. And this dialogue, we look at it from a public-public perspective, is the intergovernmental institutions talking to each other and already agreeing, how this would be implemented in a harmonized way, in an enabling way, for the beneficiaries of the legislation. Right. Then we also look at public-private dialogue. The key stakeholders who may need to adjust their mode of operation and adjust to comply, have they been involved? Have their voices been heard in this process and in this journey? Right. So those levels of dialogue are very important. And sometimes also just being okay with having the sticky conversations and agreeing to meet halfway, because all the organizations or stakeholders would be coming with their interests and needs that need to be addressed. So when these cluster of voices then come together through the policy formulation process, implementation becomes much easier because buy-in has been gotten, along the process. So even for the businesses or the cooperative entities that would need to adjust, they'll be more willing to comply. Compliance goes up. And that support between government and the sector becomes more streamlined, because now the sector knows if there are issues that come up along the way that are burdensome, we have a platform through which we can keep talking and having dialogue.
And having that conversation.
The other aspect on the intergovernmental dialogue that the bill tries to address is the formation of an intergovernmental relations technical committee. Because there's some functions that may be shared, like inquiries and liquidation of cooperatives and the like. Right. So this technical forum would bring together the directors and the Office of the Commissioner for Cooperative Development to already start, discussing and having dialogue. These are areas where a lot of time has been spent and has seen delays, and such a framework would help to fast track that.
Let's talk about now the project, of course, that you're involved in, CLEAR specifically. What lessons is the project CLEAR learning, and how can they be applied in improving the cooperative performance?
Allow me to just give very briefly a picture of CLEAR, in case some of your viewers have not heard of us.
It's crucial.
So Global Communities is implementing a number of projects in Kenya across several technical areas. Global Communities has been in existence for 60 years, over 60 years, working in over 26 countries across 5 continents. But in Kenya specifically, the USAID funded Cooperatives Leadership Engagement Advocacy and Research Program, dubbed CLEAR, is now in its 5th year, and we've learned several things in the policy space.
Right.
When we're starting off, we were trying to understand, so as we're going to engage with 25 or so counties within the life of the program, where are they at? So we did a baseline study with the counties, about 33 counties at that time, to just find out where they are in terms of understanding of the cooperative identity and policy making process, because now with the devolved function, they would need to create policy and legislation for their jurisdictions. What we found was that there was a huge gap in terms of, yes, we have people with degrees, masters, others even with doctorates serving in the county government, but they had never been involved in the policy formulation process. So we collaborated with Strathmore University Business School and developed a program, a 3-week program, to take them through the public policy making process with a focus on cooperative, the cooperative movement, as we're familiarizing them on the national policy. So through that, 264 graduated from 28 counties, and we also got several key stakeholders within the movement to go through that course as well, to create an ecosystem.
Right.
So what that taught us is there's need for that continued education and learning, and not to assume that because county governments have functions, there's a clear-cut understanding of how that's to run. The other thing was, through these donor-funded programs, we're able to pilot certain concepts at a smaller scale, and then inform different stakeholders of what's workable or not. So one other lesson we learned was that there's an appetite for the worker cooperatives business model, because unlike right now, our first wave of cooperatives in Kenya was the agri-based cooperatives in dairy, coffee, and a lot of Kenyans grew up, especially in the tea, coffee growing areas and dairy. They grew up and went to school with the letters, the to whom it may concern letters that I was telling you about earlier, where the cooperative would write letters to the respective schools where their members' children were being educated, and it would be a lot of undertaking saying when the harvest comes and we receive our dues, the fees will be paid, and no children would be kicked out of school. So we call it the to whom it may concern generation, right?
Interesting, yeah.
And that was a really interesting time, and also speaks to the power of the cooperative movement, if well nurtured. Then we went into the wave of financial cooperatives growing and booming, and the SACCOs. And I want to believe when you look to every other Kenyan, you're either a beneficiary directly or indirectly from a cooperative through the SACCOs and the products given. And I think that wave has served its course and continues to serve. And we're now in another wave of innovation, and the worker-owned cooperative model would provide for that. We have fundis. We have two worker-owned cooperatives that have fundis. Your building construction fundis, from your mason, plumber, carpenter, name it. They came together. They've done a number of projects through this model. The worker cooperative secures the jobs or the contract. They get their fundis to go and do the work, pay the wages using their internally agreed upon rate cards. And thereafter also withholds money for the cooperative, that then, at the end of the year, this worker who is an owner also will benefit from the dividend. We have women in solar energy and entrepreneurship. They do solar PV installations across the country.
Very interesting.
Auto mechanics, waste management. In Makueni County, there's a worker cooperative that supplies water, deals with water supplies, another one in border and transport.
Right.
So it's an opportunity for innovation.
And addressing a lot of key issues, of course, that people face. You know, since we have like less than 2 minutes to go, what are some of the emerging trends you could say is best performing when it comes to the cooperative sector here in Kenya? And of course, globally.
Right. So I've already mentioned the worker cooperative model as an emerging trend.
Yeah.
The other trend has been breaking silos, because as I said, the cooperatives are across all the productive sectors of the economy. And so breaking silos and coming together as, you know, government and different stakeholders within the cooperative movement to co-create the agenda and jointly implement will be very key. There's some initiatives that are already underway, being spearheaded by, you know, the national government and Council of Governors and other stakeholders. They're best placed to speak more about it. But should those initiatives be successfully implemented, I think that's going to be a game changer for the cooperative movement in Kenya. And finally, also the trend of cooperatives operating as businesses is very key. So that need for accountability and management, having in place your proper hybrid business documents, having targets, and also exploring, you know, digital marketing and, you know, other ways in which you can expand your markets is very key. And as we are continuing to integrate in the global village,
right,
having cooperative business entities also looking beyond local markets is a key trend that we've been seeing and observing.
Right. Thank you so much. Of course, very informative session there on cooperatives and policies in the country and globally. So thank you so much. That was Olga Oyer. She is the Policy and Legislative Affairs Expert and the USAID Clear program implemented by the global communities. Right. That's it for News Center. Thank you so much for making time. My name is Fatea Noor.